It's 6:30.
Did you hear from SimQuest yet?
No, I didn't expect to.
Probably hear from him tomorrow.
Okay.
He sent us a bill. The new email cut over. She just, she's got this info.
I gotta figure it out.
You have a town account too?
Yeah, cemetery.
Oh,
Yep, in theory.
She's the cemetery assistant.
okay. Are you recording?
Yep.
All right. Well, in that case,
We need any of that. I
um,
guess we'll hand it over to Liz anyways. I think that's the agenda.
yeah, whatever. So this is the Master Planning Task Force in Enfield. And we are calling the meeting to order at, now we call it 6:31. And task force members present from my left.
Shirley Green.
I'm David Frack.
Lindsay Smith.
Dan Regan.
Joelle and Courtney. Bridget Labrie.
And on the big screen,
Phil Vermeer.
live from Arizona.
Lucky guy.
We also have Rob Taylor, Whitney Banker, and our two wonderful expert planners, Liz Kelly and Crystal Kidd, both coming in from Plymouth or thereabouts. So without further ado, I am going to turn the meeting over to Liz and Crystal because it's what they do. So go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for meeting with us tonight. It's great to see you all, even though it's virtual. I'm just going to give a general overview of what we've been working on the last few months and just give an update on the research analysis and the committee outreach meetings that we've been attending. So last Thursday, we finished up our last committee outreach meeting, ending with the Conservation Commission. We also attended committee meetings with the Heritage Commission, the Town Facilities and Services Group, the Energy Committee, and the Recreation Committee, which ended up being directly with the Recreation Director, which was also good insight. We have provided some of our notes from these committee meetings. We wanted to share them with you in order to give you guys a chance to see really what we heard from these meetings and just some of the key kind of takeaways that we've gotten. And then in addition to these committee meetings, we've also been conducting our own internal research behind the scenes, and this would include reviewing like the 2023 town annual reports, the most recent natural resource inventory, and the most recent capital improvements plan. And then we've also been reviewing some state documents and resources along with regional within the Upper Valley. And then lastly, we've really done some extensive mapping for the inventory and trends section of this phase 2. And some of these maps include a community facilities and floodplain map, Enfield's town-owned property and floodplain map, Enfield's water and sewer distribution, and Enfield's electric and telecommunication infrastructure. Also a map of Enfield's recreation resources with the conservation overlaid, conservation lands overlaid on that. And lastly, a map of historic preservation. And all of these were done to look identical formatting to the phase 1 master plan maps. And so with that, I guess I'll just pass it over to Liz as we've put together a PowerPoint presenting some of this a bit more into what we've learned from our research and meeting with the committee thus far.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. Okay.
We're seeing Florida. That's in Arizona.
Hey, Rob, close the participants so we can see this.
All right. Can everyone see this?
Look, the like X over. Yeah.
Yeah, good idea.
Yes. Yes.
Can everyone see these
Yes.
slides? Yeah. Okay, sorry. I, for some
I
reason,
can see it in Arizona.
I for some reason can't see you all now. So I'm actually gonna try to, let me escape this really quick and see if I can, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna reshare. I think I should click window instead of screen. Let's do that. Okay. Can you all see the slides?
Yes. Yep.
We're just gonna roll with it. Okay. I know I can't see you all, so just what I think is probably going to be best is if I go through the initial kind of findings, inventory trends, etc., and then once I go through those slides, we have discussion at the end. If that works, I don't anticipate it taking too long, but if folks are okay with kind of just going through that brief overview before diving into the discussion, does that work?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Awesome. Okay, great. So as Crystal mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work to get ourselves up to speed with Enfield's resources as they relate to the 5 topics that are included as part of the phase 2 update. And so the committee notes that we provided you will provide a good amount of additional detail beyond what I'm going to cover. This also includes some of the analysis information that we gleaned from looking at mapping, from the document review, et cetera. Keep in mind that this is merely a snapshot. Because I don't want to keep you here for 3 hours. We really just tried to highlight some of the specific findings that seemed noteworthy to us as part of this presentation, as well as some inventory items that get you all up to speed in kind of thinking about the existing conditions of Enfield's town facilities, of Enfield's open space and conservation areas, its recreation assets, et cetera. And so hopefully that will just produce more fruitful conversation later during the remainder of this meeting, but also for if you all plan to meet and dig into some of this a little bit further yourselves. So consider this an overview, and I'm just going to dive in. Okay, so aside from the overview of some of our initial findings from our research and analysis, we wanted to make sure that we do save at least 15-20 minutes at the end of this meeting to talk about the community forum events that will be in May, which the dates are listed on your agenda. And we'll also want to talk a little bit about next steps in project timeline before we all leave here tonight. So just want to throw that out there so that you all can help me keep on time. Okay, any questions before I dive in?
No.
Okay, great. So we wanted to start off first by talking about heritage and preservation. So as Crystal said, we did meet with the Heritage Commission and have been reviewing a lot of other documents that have informed us about the importance of heritage in Enfield. In general, we can think about heritage and preservation of heritage as historic and cultural preservation of Enfield's built and natural environment, and even safeguarding the town's small town community traditions and quote unquote way of life of Enfield in general. And so oftentimes heritage can really encompass more than just historic preservation. It can also include examining cultural organizations and the role of these other types of community spaces and assets in defining the character and identity of Enfield. And so often a preservation chapter or heritage and preservation chapter will typically include an inventory of historic and cultural resources. It'll include recommendations that help Enfield reach its goals related to preservation of these resources in the future. So as many of you know, Enfield has numerous historic resources that are located throughout the town. Enfield is particularly unique in that it has this kind of pastoral farming heritage of the Shakers, but it also has this unique industrial legacy along the rivers that exists in town, which I think makes it a really unique community. There are a number of stone walls that extend throughout the woodlands of Enfield that really illustrate its agricultural past and sort of the forest section that has now taken place. There's a scenic byway and other more locally designated scenic roadways in town. 3.2 miles, I believe, is how much of the scenic byway, the Enfield Shaker Village Scenic Byway, extends through town. The Shaker Museum is obviously of an incredible historic asset. The Shaker legacy in general is strong in town, and it's one of only 18 Shaker communities in the country, which is really cool, in my opinion. There's also several historic districts. For example, the Enfield Center Historic District includes numerous historic structures that are important to the character of the community, including Enfield Center Townhouse, the Enfield Center Schoolhouse, and the Union Church of Enfield Center. And the Enfield Village Historic District is one of the larger historic districts in the state. Additionally, the rivers are also a part of Enfield's historic legacy. Some of the woolen mills were located along the waterway and the waterways, and these are really symbols of kind of these engines of development. And you can still see some of the remnants of mill foundations and the canal system today. Additionally, Enfield's roadways and transportation assets also were important for the development of the town's economy, such as the railroad, which is now the Northern Rail Trail in Enfield, as well as the establishment of Route 4A, and then increased access to the interstate really expanded opportunity for the town over time. Enfield also has a number of historic homes and structures and cemeteries as well, which can also, some of which can also be considered historic assets. Additionally, there are 5 properties and areas that are on the National Register of Historic Places, and there are 10, these are just 3 examples that are listed, properties that are listed on the New Hampshire State Register of Historic Places. So this is an initial map that shows some of the historic resources in Enfield. What I'm hoping to also get from you all tonight is your general feedback on the maps and whether there are, 1, any corrections that need to be made, because this is our first pass, and 2, if there's anything that you were hoping to see that you're not seeing, we want to know what that is as well. So at the end of this presentation, I'll circle back to that question. But this map shows the distribution of cemeteries, which I believe Rob helped our GIS analyst, Zach, populate. We've also included all these little yellow lines show the distribution of stone walls that exist in Enfield, which is very extensive and really dispersed throughout the community. And so this is used through a LiDAR mapping layer that was gleaned by our analyst. There are 11.3 miles of scenic roads. And I believe that this map just shows the Enfield Village Historic District. Is that correct? It's the more like light green. I think you can see my mouse, correct? It's like hovering above by numbers 10 and 15 as far as the cemeteries go, just north of Mascoma Lake. But I don't believe that Enfield Center Historic District is on here. So we can, if we can accumulate a shapefile for that, we can add it. We've also been inventorying what some of the community organizations are in Enfield. So we obviously talked about a few with the Heritage Commission, and that are some of which are more specifically geared towards promotion of heritage and history and protecting those resources, like the Heritage Commission, like the Historical Society. But we did also branch out and talk about the Lions Club and the Garden Club, and we know that there's many others as well that are really important for kind of this culture of volunteerism in town. So we do want to highlight those as well. We also know that there's a number of community events that the town holds on an annual basis. I know that Old Home Day was revived about 10 years ago, and so that's a fun, very town-centric event. There's the Memorial Parade, the Scarecrow Display in fall, the Harvest Festival, which takes place at the Shaker Museum, and then a variety of other community events that the Shaker Museum puts on, such as the monthly Sunday Supper, free concert series, seminars and speakers and workshops. So all of these contribute to kind of the traditions in life in Enfield. So issues, opportunities, and priorities. So we wanted to summarize a little bit of what we're hearing from some of our conversations with the Heritage Commission, and we know that all of this information, both inventory information as well as kind of the preliminary identification of priorities, like looking ahead into the future. This is going to provide really good base info for us to begin having conversations with the public during these community forum events. And so this is not like end all be all information. We want to like check this again with kind of public priority as far as where they're hoping that the community focuses their attention in the future around these 5 topics. But we still wanted to highlight some of them for you tonight as a means for discussion and identifying kind of a preliminary direction forward. So we did learn that there will be an extension of the scenic byway designation from the Route 4A intersection, which is where it currently is, to the Shaker Museum, and basically that extension would extend out to the town line of Grafton, and that this will really help preserve the historic character of this area, and so that's an exciting initiative to reference. That there is an opportunity in the future to really restore the Enfield Center Townhouse and begin to really actively utilize it as a community space again, and that there's a real role for this structure to serve as that kind of vital community space, especially with some improvements made to the structure. That there's this desire to reinforce Enfield's heritage as a part of town life. So really identifying how heritage can be incorporated into how the town might think about economic development, recreation, conservation, community pride, that it's really connected to a lot of these other initiatives that the town, or it can be connected to a lot of these initiatives that the town has already begun committing to with the Phase 1 master plan update in relation to, again, economic development, et cetera. And that there's a real opportunity to bring the community together through promoting heritage. And again, emphasizing that unique aspect of Enfield where there's this pastoral farming heritage, there's this kind of industrial relics in town, and it makes it a really interesting place to visit and to live, as well as continuing to maintain Enfield's historic assets, which we know is a really obvious part of historic preservation of any community. But that's important in thinking about how this will happen moving forward. Okay. I almost want to ask if you all have questions because it breaks up the presentation a little bit. Would you all like to wait until the end, or would it help if I took a couple questions as we went along to just break up the one person talking?
Let's take some questions to see if we have any.
Okay.
And we have to bring extras. Not Phil, which is rather still.
Yeah, if we had some notes on there just for some corrections, does that work?
Yes.
Would you rather those now?
So I don't mind taking some now, but I will, if you have them in writing, I would love to take them if they're a little bit more detailed than just referencing something. Like if they're more detailed, I'd love to take them in writing.
Okay.
But yes, we're definitely looking for corrections. Like if there's anything that we're saying or reporting that's inaccurate, or that's because we're only hearing this information kind of either filtering it through our own lens of reading something or the conversation with the commission. If we got anything wrong, we really want to know.
Okay. I was just going to touch on cemeteries, but I can send it all in writing.
Okay. And if you have like anything you want to say about that right now, go for it. But any more like detailed stuff, I'd love to just take in writing. Would be most easiest.
Yeah, I can send it in writing. It's just all corrections.
Perfect.
On numbers and stuff. So.
Oh, good.
Not.
Thank you. We don't want to have maps that portray wrong information.
Well,
so
yeah. The map is fine. It's just we have the number of cemeteries and that stuff. So
And Bridget is actually our cemetery sextant, so she can certainly get you more
amazing.
detail. Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that because I came across a couple discrepancies with numbers too, and I had on my list to double check it. Like I saw 27 in one place, I saw 18 on the map, and I was identifying that as a place that needed to be looked into further. So I'm glad you brought it up.
yeah, our rules and regulations are on the town website. There are 26, but only 16 are really maintained by the town. And then
Great.
you have Grove private and all that stuff. So, I think I'll just grab that and send it all to you because it kind of outlines what we don't maintain, some that we don't know where they are. anymore.
Lost cemeteries. Ooh.
Yeah,
That's
that's.
often known, yeah.
I
I
went
think
searching.
89 went through one, you know, it's fine. Details.
Joanne, you had a question?
Well, I had a comment. I came upon the walking tour, the brochure.
Yes,
I have that as a document in a file. I can send that to you.
I mean, I'll
awesome.
take
Thank
those
you
as
so
well.
much.
Sure.
Dan?
Hey, Liz, I just had a thought. I love the maps and I wonder, could we also show maps from 100 years ago? What the town looked like? You referenced the stone walls and how it really shows our agricultural heritage. If we have any maps that go back 100 or even 200 years, that would be really interesting.
I totally agree. It would be interesting, and we would want to work with you all or a representative of the town to identify what an appropriate mapping resource that would work. But that would be interesting.
We had some in Crystal Lake when the industry was there.
Yeah, and I'd love to see like the mill when it was fully.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like that. Yeah.
We'll get you some, I have a cool, historic postcard collection too, with some really cool old.
Yes.
So we can
Neat.
certainly get you some scans and things like that. So.
That's great.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on historical and heritage? I have, I guess, two. Lions Club is L-I, not L-Y.
One of my notes.
Oh, thank you. I wonder why. Do some
You're not a lion, obvious, or lioness.
That autocorrect.
And my first reaction to the map was, boy, it's awfully cluttered until you explained the stone walls. And perhaps using a darker color rather than a lighter color might de-emphasize that.
Okay, great. We can do that.
And I will give you lots of comments from a graphic perspective as we go through, so bear with me, please.
That's fine with us. Yeah, we really see these as kind of our initial first pass at this, so we really appreciate that. Any
On
other
to
last,
facilities.
what was that, David?
I said on to facilities and
Perfect.
services.
Okay. All right, town facilities and services. So I think this goes without saying, but any town is responsible for providing essential services to current and future residents and businesses. And as part of a town facilities and services chapter, we really want to understand space, facility, infrastructure, and staffing needs, and project some of those future needs over time, so that the town can better prepare for spending and capital improvements in the future. And so that's a major role of this chapter of a master plan. So as was mentioned earlier, community facilities have been mapped. And so this shows the location of each of the community facilities in town. Let us know if we're missing any that should be on this map, as well as it being overlaid with floodplain information. And so there are several municipal buildings in Enfield. I think many of us know that the Public Works, transfer station, fire station, police station, some of which we know are going to be consolidated in the new public safety complex. But as of right now, these are separate structures. The Depot Street EMS building, the Enfield Center Townhouse. So these are all really important municipal facilities that provide community services to the residents of Enfield. Also not on this list or not shown on this map, but would also be considered community sites and spaces, would be, again, the town cemeteries, the parks, athletic fields, town beaches. Many of these are covered in some of the other topics that we're going to discuss, but those also would be considered community facilities and would be referenced somehow in this chapter. Additionally, water and sewer is also part of Enfield's town infrastructure. So this map shows the extent of water and sewer distribution, and the three different colors show where in Enfield has access to water, has access to sewer, and then has access to both water and sewer. And so that's shown in the pink. And so you can see much of that is focused within Enfield Village and the surrounding areas. And then we've also created a map that shows town-owned properties and that floodplain layer again. And so there are 60 town-owned properties, of which about half are located in the floodplain. And so our GIS analyst has identified some of the areas in town that are most impacted by floodplain that are described to the left here. And we'll make sure that you all get this PowerPoint presentation in case you'd like to flip through some of this at your own leisure as well.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to, why did you not put in the prime wetlands with the floodplains? Some of them are together anyway, but there are some that are not listed.
We can do that. Yeah, I can ask my GIS or our GIS analyst to add prime wetlands to the map if others think that this would be a worthwhile feature. I don't actually have an answer to why they were discluded, but
I had it listed. I went through the conservation one and that was, they were not listed, but I don't know if you're aware that that's a study done by the Conservation Commission. It took a couple of years and we actually had somebody go out and went through all these areas and they identified the basic values of the wetland. And we picked, I think they came across 10 or 12, and we only put on 4 or 5. We didn't do all of them at the time, but in the future, we should do the rest of them as a goal. But that it's important. Those are very important wetlands to hang on to because they're important to the whole diversity of the wildlife and everything else, but they name everything that's in the wetland.
So would they make sense in town-owned properties and floodplain? Would they make sense in this chapter, or we are doing the conservation chapter? And
No, they should be in there.
I mean, would they make more sense in their own map in the chapter that is about conservation?
Well,
versus
it all
facilities?
depends really what they're gonna use that for.
Sure.
You know, if
That-
somebody
that-
wants to go in and,
Right, that's my overall question. I mean, I'm not asking you to answer it. The overall question is, yes, we should have wetlands mapped. Do they make sense here or in the natural resource chapter, depending on how we're using this information? Like, what's the purpose of pointing out this information? This map has to have a purpose.
just that you
That's all.
really can't do anything in them.
Well, right, but again, like, what's the point of pointing out town-owned properties? That's not to say we can't do anything, like,
Right.
again, what's this map for? What's it illustrating? And that's the overall key question.
I think when we have the layers.
Yeah.
As we were talking about how, we'll be able to kind of like take a map and then put the different layers you want to see.
I
think that would be-
I
yeah,
understand, we don't own all this.
Yeah, and that's where, like, I'm not challenging you, I'm just saying, again,
Yeah,
like, to
do
think
it.
about, we don't need, maybe they make sense on this map, maybe they don't, like,
Yeah.
the soils don't make sense on this map. Like,
Soil's a different
what's,
story.
yeah, right, exactly. So what's the story that this map is telling us?
I think as we develop the verbiage of the plan, that's gonna
Sure.
become clear. And, my modus operandi, and perhaps it's Liz's as well, is you get all these different elements floating out there.
Sure.
And then, once you really figure out what you're going to do, then you put them all together, not at the last minute, but certainly not at this phase.
Right,
And, we're
Yeah.
just, trying to gather the elements together.
yeah, that's just my overall question, is like, what's the story that this map's telling us? Because right now, to me, it's a cool map, but I don't know what it means. But I know I'll find
Neither
out.
do we, but it will become clear.
Yeah, yep. So,
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
go ahead.
we're still in the process of interpreting all of that too. I know that this was identified as something that was of interest in exploring. And I agree, like, this could easily be information that might be better integrated in kind of more of the economic development piece. Who knows? It really depends like on what ends up emerging as far as kind of like the future and goals of some of these town-owned properties, some of which are already listed in the phase 1 plan, I'm sure, and some of which are going to be fleshed out further in this process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's where like, I know from conversations in town, like there's people who think the town owns all this property and that we should be selling it, you know? So that's
Right.
our, like, these are conversations, so it'll be interesting to, it's interesting to see where those properties are. What do they mean? Are they worth selling? Or are they not, you know, because that's the implementation and what do we do with these things later?
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, keep going, sorry.
Yeah, that's great. This is good conversation. Okay, so, and as far as the prime wetlands, ultimately, we are happy to add information about prime wetlands to this map if you all think it's a good addition. And we can also just talk about prime wetlands mapping in general as part of the phase 2 update for even the open space and natural resources section. So we'll circle back to that. Okay, town services. So Enfield provides many town services, and we'll dive into that in some level of depth within the master plan as it's relevant. And so that includes, you know, any services ranging from administration to police, fire, and EMS, to road maintenance, to waste disposal and recycling, recreation programming, grounds and facility maintenance. And we touched on a lot of these services in our conversation with the municipal facilities group that was put together to converse with Crystal and I. And we did just want to highlight specifically many projects with which you are all probably familiar with that are either recent or underway or going to be happening soon that really fill in the story of where Enfield is at in terms of municipal improvements and upgrades and the future of its facilities over time. But there is a renovation of Whitney Hall that's currently being worked on, and that is anticipated to be completed by spring of 2024. There is the new public safety complex where funds have been allocated and approved. And that's going to consolidate some of the multiple town structures, police, fire, et cetera, into one complex. And really, when we were talking with the group that was put together, it was noted that the work on these two structures in particular is expected to address many of Enfield's kind of current needs over the next 10 years. And so those were really important upgrade projects that were happening. Additionally, there have been water and sewer improvements. So there's recently replacement of the 1903 water line has been going on. And it was also identified that in the near future, an investigation of new well locations to add capacity to the water system is being explored. We know that there's also sewer infrastructure upgrades in the works, as well as pipe replacements and manholes and et cetera. And the town has also recently received a grant to expand fiber internet in town, and will be working with a company over the next few years to expand to 100% coverage in Enfield. So important projects that are either happening or going to be happening soon. So in our discussions with the facilities group, we talked about a lot of different aspects of the future of municipal facilities, ranging from very specific site improvements, such as Hughes Park, that there were going to be some upgrades anticipated for that particular community space, to more general type topics. And so I'll just touch on a few of those for a moment here. It was identified that there was a need for just more education in general to residents about the town services that are available. There was also identified as a need was to determine the future use of the police station, the fire station, and the EMS ambulance area at 18 Depot Street. That the future use of these sites was going to have to be investigated and looked at, knowing that the public safety complex will house those in the future. Additionally, we learned that Enfield Fire and EMS anticipates an increase in calls for service. And so we'll dig into a little bit more about what the if there has been an increase in what that looks like in recent years, but for the future, this has been identified as an anticipated need. And in 2024, a study is going to be conducted to better understand service utilization, specifically fire and EMS service utilization in the community, knowing that they've had a hard time retaining and recruiting volunteers for this service. And so how does that look in the future, and how does the that branch of Enfield Services plan to address that need? Additionally, we learned that there is an interest in developing an asset management program to better track maintenance of facilities and infrastructure. And so we'll definitely want to highlight that as a future project. It sounds like it's already going to be happening regardless, but maintaining that database of infrastructure needs to better plan for anticipated expenditures will be very beneficial for the town. Additionally, there are going to be some sewer pump station upgrades required in the future. And one item that really stuck out was that it was noted that roads, bridges, and culverts would be the biggest anticipated expenditure over the next 10 years, that there's a lot of maintenance that would need to happen to the roadway infrastructure specifically in the future at this time. Additionally, stormwater management needs are increasing. And so in the committee notes that we provided, there's a good amount of detailed information about that. And there's also anticipated infrastructure projects that will be related to new residential development as that occurs over time. Okay, any questions on town facilities and services so far? Again, please remember this is high level overview information, but we're really curious to hear if there's anything that you have not heard that you want to make sure we know, or corrections that you want to make.
Anybody have anything for Liz?
Yeah, so Liz, the thing that was striking me, and this may be in there, or in the plans, I just want it to be earmarked. At the very beginning, you said that the role of the town is to provide essential services.
Mhm.
And I'd really like to make sure that we're defining what that means, and also asking questions of, maybe it's a ranking question, of what are those essential services, and how are those defined, and what priorities are they to the town? I think, again, from conversations that I've heard based around budgets and stuff like that, there are folks that are like, we don't need this and we don't need that, because they're trying to do anything they can to cut budgets.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be a small, vocal minority, right? Where it's actually a priority for a lot of people. Trash and recycling was a big conversation recently, or it seemed it probably smaller than it seems, but that's an example. And again, like, how the master plan is helpful if we say, no, this is actually a priority of the town. Whitney Hall renovation, people identified that when they're filling out a survey as preserving our historic buildings. When they're in a budget meeting, they get mad about it. But, so I really want to help us make sure that we are identifying what essential services mean. Who they serve, and then also helping the people fill it out to really help us rank them and to prove for that. It might be a vocal minority, it might be a majority of people that say, oh, we don't really need this or that because they're trying to find, tax relief or budget cuts or whatever. I think that's where this chapter will be most helpful in many ways. It goes along with that, like, oh, the town owns all this property that we're hoarding and we should sell it because, are we really? Is that,
that many.
right? So that's where I think this chapter is going to be actually extra helpful. So I want to make sure that we're designing questions that help to identify those things.
Anyone else?
I had a quick question on the first map that you showed. You had blacked out roads that I think were in the floodplain.
Yes.
So I get super touchy about this, but my driveway is marked as that, and it is not a town road.
Oh, okay, that's good to know, though.
It's this whole, there's many layers, and let's just say I didn't pay to find out all of the layers from the surveyor, but, so I think the state recognizes it still in some capacity as like maybe a class 6. It doesn't go all the way through either way. It's my driveway.
There's a few places like
Yeah,
that.
that's,
If they wanted to reclaim it, I guess they could, is kind of what it boils down to.
But that's an interesting topic,
No
'cause
reason they would.
there, I think there's
Oh, it
several
is.
places like that that are.
It's right, yeah. It was called Bishop Lane, so where 4A and Shaker Hill come together, it used to be like this little diagonal cut through,
Mhm.
and they got rid of that. And
if you,
I'm totally cool if they wanna plow my driveway and I don't have to pay for it anymore, but that's not working as an argument for me, so come on, knock that right off there.
But that's a good.
I just don't wanna
footnote, 'cause
identify
I
it
don't
as a
think you're the
public road.
only person that has that.
No,
I think there's. I
And
feel
it
like
has been
there's-
actually a project for the select board and the public works
Uh-huh.
to identify places that we've been maintaining that we really shouldn't be maintaining.
That's a good couple
And-
sentences.
And they've
in
gone
this, you know.
through
That
and
one-
actually eliminated a lot of those. And of course, there's some ruffled feathers like, we've always plowed my driveway.
I know.
Why are we doing it? You know, like,
I just, I looked at this and I was like, oh, I don't really want the town members who read this to think that that's a town road.
so if
That
you
vision.
wouldn't mind, or at some point, like highlighting somehow on the map, whether it's like putting it in PowerPoint and adding a circle on top of it, or like marking a marked up copy and scanning it, like, which I know sounds like a lot of work, but any way to let us know where that is, we'll make the change. And if there's any other roadways where it's the same issue, we're happy to note that.
I feel like Mr. Thice had one like that too. I know he was he was focusing on something that was a similar story, like, no, I got.
I've tried.
Um,
He said.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Dan, go
Yeah,
ahead.
kind of following on with what Lindsay had said earlier.
That's why.
I like the part of the chapter that looks at what our needs are over the next 10 years. And I think that's a
Yep.
really part. Liz almost doing a gap analysis of, hey, we need to, be aware that we need these services, these facilities, and this infrastructure that isn't currently planned. Because I think you're right, Lindsay, a lot of people, it comes as a surprise, and we wanted people to realize that there's gonna be a cost to these things, but we need them. So I think really highlighting where we're currently deficient and where we may be really deficient 10 years from now if we don't do certain things. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think that's especially so with water and sewer.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's great,
we
thank you.
Shirley?
Yeah,
did you
I
have
think
some
it's
comments?
important when we do try to find out from citizens what they think their real needs are
Mhm.
and what their wishes are,
Mhm.
according to what they would want to pay for.
People report things differently on paper than they will in a meeting, and if you
Yeah.
just rank your options,
Because
it'll
if
be
they-
much different than they'll say in
They
person.
realize how expensive their wishes are, maybe they'll remove that.
But we
Exactly.
probably won't have a price tag next to it, but we can at least say this is identified.
And the understanding, like you said, of this is required, so you
Yeah.
can not want this, but that's
Need it.
not
Like the
an
town's
option.
not just a geographical location, that there is a responsibility to the people of that town to provide.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's an important definition,
Yeah.
not just a geographical identity,
Right.
which is, like, just, as far as the role of government, all that, but I think that's a really important distinction to make. Okay.
Is some of
Avoid the
that,
circles.
is some of that embodied in state law, in RSAs?
Probably, that's where it's good to pull it out and just define.
I'm happy that you brought that up though, Lindsay, as far as just the value in asking residents really what services do they see as essential, what services do they want essentially to invest in. And it was also brought up at the meeting that we had with the municipal facilities and services group as being questions that staff wanted to, that was a question that staff wants to see the answer to as well. So it seems like that really should be incorporated into the community forum events, the outreach on that particular topic.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a couple. One is, did I miss library as one of the town services?
You did. It wasn't an exhaustive list, but it should have been on there.
I think, you know, it's a focal point of the community and, you know, we ought to highlight it.
Yep.
Secondly, I think I'm a bit surprised and somewhat taken aback to learn that after committing $7 million for a new public safety facility, we are learning that the town is going to conduct a study on utilization. Does anyone else feel that way?
No,
What do you mean by
I'm
that?
not sure.
I'm only saying that because Roy, they did have some feedback. I feel like
I
a
thought that-
while ago in a select board meeting, even possibly.
I thought they did, and
I don't know that was a full study, but it was kind of a,
They did it,
here's what we have, here's where we have come, like in their, I'll use the police, in their current building, right, has changed over 25, 20, they've been there for a long time. So they already know, like, their needs are there and they know officer needs but
And I think the majority of what Liz is referring to is actually on the fire side.
Yes.
So the fire department continues to struggle with having enough people to respond when the bell goes off.
Yeah.
And is it the future that we continue to have volunteer or paid fire? Or is it the future that someday, like every other bigger town and big city, that we have full-time staff? Or do we hire Lebanon to come and cover us? I don't know. Those are the kind of things they'll look at, but I think that's one of those things that, you know, it's natural, the growing through to this facility. Maybe there's changes that need to be made with staffing for sure.
I don't think it was included in the reason to put the fire department in there. The whole issue was the building that the fire department was in,
oh yeah, there was.
not the operation.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
okay, let's go on to conservation.
Okay. All right, conservation. So you, in the phase one master plan update part of this project, some of the open space and natural resources were mapped. For this particular presentation, we've included 2 maps from the phase one master plan update that were, I believe, in the land use section. We also have access, I believe there's some mapping that was done for the 2021 natural resource inventory. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
That there was some mapping done for the 2021 natural
Yes.
resource. Yes, exactly.
So you've seen that?
Yes, I've seen I haven't looked, I've read the majority of the text, but I haven't gone and looked at the maps yet. So I just want to make sure that there are, those resources are mapped.
Oh, yes.
Great. So right now we're just showing 2 of the maps that were in the phase one update for discussion purposes. And so we can talk about that a little bit after this part of the presentation as far as natural resource mapping goes. But so a lot of the information that we're presenting here, because the 2021 NRI was so recently completed, it gave us a really good base. And we want to make sure that the information in the NRI and the master plan are aligned, since that was a recently completed project. So please correct me if there are any numbers that are wrong. It's amazing how numbers can just be wrong no matter how well we try to report them from, different sources. They say different things. So just please let me know. But according to the NRI, nearly 8,000 acres are protected from development. Or I'm sorry, this is actually from the phase one master plan update. I believe that the NRI set a slightly lower number, and we can talk about the discrepancy between those later. But the phase one master plan update stated that nearly 8,000 acres of land are protected from development because it's public or privately conserved open space, which is a really significant portion of the town. Ownership of conservation lands include a variety of entities, such as Upper Valley Land Trust, New Hampshire Fish and Game, the State of New Hampshire, Grafton Pond Land Trust, the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests, the Payne Preserve, and the Town of Enfield. And according to the 2021 NRI, about 9,882 acres of land have potential wildlife corridors, of which I believe this data came from the New Hampshire Fish and Game Wildlife Corridor data layer, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
It's not all it's not all the state, the Fish and Wildlife, corridor is just one thing, but there's a lot more. I don't know how they did that on, probably, but, they do it from the pictures. Over the forest and what's there, and they'll say it's a corridor. Now I forgot what I was gonna say. One thing I was gonna say is that the Grafton Pond thing is not in Enfield. I don't know how we got that. I don't know, that trust is not Enfield. That's a lot of land that surrounds Grafton Pond. Grafton Pond is not in Enfield.
But is there some land from the Grafton Pond Trust in Enfield? Because the line's pretty close to the Grafton Pond, isn't
I
it?
know it is close. I don't think it's in Enfield though.
We can tell by the maps.
Huh?
Yeah, we can tell by the map.
Tax maps.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to look into that then. That was pulled from the NRI, so we'll want to make sure that that's addressed.
Yeah, some land must be, because if you go down Grafton Pond Road, I mean,
I was just
That-
thinking like
that's
Polly
Enfield.
lives in Enfield.
right,
And she's on Grafton Pond Road,
Right.
so
They're
she's gotta
close.
be pushing close.
Okay, we'll make a note to just double check though, that that's accurate.
We'll clarify. Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a significant amount of land in Enfield that's currently in the conservation district, with a lot of this land being under protection already by Upper Valley Land Trust, by New Hampshire Fish and Game in the state. However, there are several large pieces of property in this district that are not conserved, which I'm not saying either way. I'm just saying that they aren't. At least over 6,000 acres in Enfield are identified as having prime farmland soils. Keep in mind that much of this has already been developed or is forested over, but still interesting natural resource that Enfield does have. Surface water resources. So this was mapped as part of the Phase 1 master plan update. And so most of Enfield is located in the Mascoma River watershed. And the natural resource inventory identified a few different stats, one of which I did want to communicate with someone from the Conservation Commission on, where it was identified that a little over 2,000 acres in Enfield are water habitat. And I'm just curious, I was just wondering where that term came from. And I'm assuming that it includes a certain specified distance of habitat around surface water resources. And even if you don't want to answer this now, it's just something I want to circle back to, I guess, at some point, even if it's by email. If not now, that's okay. Okay, I'll keep going. A little over 1,000 acres of Enfield is covered with prime wetlands or soils with exceptional moisture. A little over 6,000 acres of land contain hydric soils, which is significant. And about a little over 1,200 acres of land have riparian or shoreline buffers, which provide important vegetative habitat, water filtration benefits for keeping water quality in pristine condition. And 4 major aquifers exist in town and cover about 17% of the town's total land area, of which I don't believe are located on this map. It is one thing that we can look into is map, because it's not located on the map, is aquifer locations. And I did want to note that according to the NRI, and many of you probably know this, but there is high value habitat that exists around many of the surface water resources in town, like Crystal Lake, Mascoma Lake, George Pond, Spectacle Pond, etc., and along the Mascoma River. Many open spaces in Enfield provide outdoor recreation opportunities. So again, these chapters are going to end up cross-referencing each other, and it's our job to make sure that that's done in an artful and logical way. But some of the different open spaces that provide outdoor rec opportunities include Smith Pond Shaker Forest, Shaker Mountain in general, Bicknell Brook, Enfield Wildlife Management Area, of course, Shakoma Beach. So some of the issues, opportunities, and priorities. So this came out of both our research and understanding of open space and natural resources at this point in the process, knowing that we're still working our way through information, as well as through the conversation we had with the Conservation Commission last week. But we did note that in the 2021 community survey, that results indicated that there's strong support for protecting the town's natural resources, and that surface waters, wildlife corridors, and wetlands were top priorities for protection as identified in those results. We did note, which I mentioned this earlier, the importance of aligning the master plan with the 2021 NRI goals, specifically for future natural resource protection. We, in our conversations with the Conservation Commission, Enfield's water resources were a prime topic of conversation as far as the future of land stewardship and natural resource protection in town. And so just how important the lakes, the ponds, the stream network, the wetlands, the vernal pools, how important they are for Enfield's people and for wildlife and everything in between. And that water quality protection is a priority of the town. It was something that came up in, honestly, I think every one of our conversations, at least half of our conversations with each of the committees that we had leading up to this meeting. So it really seemed to cross boundaries as far as being an issue that is being addressed by town staff and departments, by different committees and commissions, different boards, et cetera. Additionally, we also talked about how wildlife is an integral part of Enfield's rural landscape, and also just landscape as a whole, and that, protecting wildlife from habitat fragmentation and human disturbance over time as development occurs and as development is guided strategically is important. Oops, I had that one twice. But it also, during our conversation with the Conservation Commission, it appeared that specifically stewardship of natural resources appeared to be a major priority, that our conversation more focused around this than anything else. And so an example of this is, further education around best management practices for shoreline development and even just maintenance of existing developed lands along the shorelines within town. To reduce water pollution, to reduce stormwater runoff, and to protect the quality of the surface water bodies. There was also noted as a need for enhanced collaboration between land use boards to accomplish natural resource protection goals, that was highlighted as something to specifically note for the future as being important to actually achieving those goals. And making forward progress on actions that will help the town achieve them. Additionally, I wanted to note that the future land use chapter that was completed in phase 1 does identify some planning directives in the rural areas of town. And so this just kind of looking at the big picture of natural resources and open space, but really connecting trail networks to where people are, ensuring development is sited to minimize fragmentation of farmland and forest, requiring cluster subdivision design. So we'll continue to do this work of kind of cross-referencing some of these other chapters that have been completed to give us some insight for the kind of future direction that's already been established related to some of these topics. So that is also on our radar.
Can I add something to this?
Yes.
We talked a lot about the facilities and the roads, and we had a terrible thing this, you probably heard about it, through the storms that happened on Crystal Lake, where people's one of the roads were washed out, and someone's septic system was washed out. We had a series of big storms. And through time, the town has ditched the side of the roads and a main road that comes down the hill. And the whole hill, which is the watershed, this is Crystal Lake, has streams coming down. And lots of times that when they, want to cross the road, this is usually the town, they'll run the water down the side of the road and then cross where they can. They don't go directly down. And I think that's the state law. They're supposed to follow how the water goes. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is when we work with the town and storm management. I think that kind of role for the lakes to have the streams, and I think the town can really help without putting all the water in one trench and and then pulling it back over to the lake. It goes in and it really, really does damage to the lake. The waterfront brings in a lot of silt. And they don't do it on purpose, they do it because that's how they know how to do it. So I'd like to see some kind of, I'll call it togetherness, to get that worked out, that when they do the roads, they're all they're dirt roads, and it just plays havoc. And it's really coming a long way, so let's see, maybe it's 2 miles or something up the hill. And that makes a big difference because they can go this way and then that way and down that way. We've got to pay attention to it, and we've got to be in control of those springs and all the streams that come down. And I think the town could help us a lot. So I don't know how you would put that in words that would be, kind or that they would understand.
I mean, I think that might be one of those public input pieces when we're collecting public input, make sure that gets added, because we get to add input. And see how many people, kind of like we collected all that info last time and we kind of saw how, we grouped like how much do we see for repeat, and so that the suggestions can then be made to the town on, what the community would like to see. Because I don't think we as a task force can put a directive, but we can share what the feedback is. So,
Well, it's
I
mean, if the people could prove it on the lake, I mean, that's a lot of damage.
yeah, I just don't know that that's us, is all I'm saying. So it's, how can
I'm
we,
saying about working in the master plan to work towards
right,
with them to do that, change the way they look at what they're
Yeah.
doing with the earth
Yeah.
and storm management. To realize the difference they could make. Yes, yeah.
I 100% agree. And I was struck, Liz, as you were, as I read the notes, that every single committee mentioned water quality.
Yeah.
Every single one. People see it as a priority. They see the cyanobacteria that's happening in all of our lakes as a major issue. I feel as though, as a task force, we could put it in there that we need a comprehensive watershed management plan. And Centipede is a great example, and the things that they have done that call for very specific requirements if you're living around a lake or a stream with your septic and with inspections. And I would like to see us be somewhat bold here and have a call for a comprehensive plan.
I have a starter. I did one 10 years ago in 2010, 2011, I was just reading it this weekend that I brought before the planning board.
My understanding is Enfield and Lebanon have secured a grant to look at watershed management plan. But again, if so many people in the town are already saying that this is a priority for us.
Well, the one I did, I worked with DES on,
Okay.
and it has a lot of things in
That
it
might
that
be a
need to
great
be
science
done,
module, yeah.
but,
Well, and I don't know the full history. I know that there's a great, it'd be interesting to touch on the improvement, because wasn't Mascoma was really polluted. I don't know,
Oh,
way back, yeah, like what, poop scoma? What it's called,
Yeah,
something like that.
in the middle.
I don't think we can put that, but, and so there's been improvements, but there might be ways to say, this is the priority, or how do we identify it? And we shouldn't say that, but we need to be asking those questions. Is this really a priority?
Yeah.
So then when we are doing other things, like as Celia was talking about, when we're looking at road surveys and road improvement plans, that part of each is the best watershed management. And what does that take? Because there might be, there's probably traditional practices,
Mhm.
and then there's also best practices.
Mhm.
Like, and they're not necessarily always the same.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's the cheap option or the more expensive option, right?
Mhm.
Or how do we track how the water's actually washing off that road versus just following the practice like it's gonna roll downhill. It might be
Yeah.
rolling downhill this way. So again, I think that's where we have to be asking those questions and seeing if we tease that information out. Our job is to be asking the questions and also noticing the trends. And if that trend is, this is a priority, then we can offer up those recommendations and saying, in every development, what's the watershed plan? What
Yeah.
is in road improvements, what's the watershed plan?
I,
And that's how we integrate all these different things.
I agree with you that we need to be asking the questions. I would also argue that as part of this outreach to
Yeah.
the 5 different committees, we heard it loud and clear. So now it's incumbent upon us to follow up on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that was also a major priority when we did the phase 1 part of the master plan.
It's loud and clear.
It's very important.
And just on the state level, we're starting to think about it. There was a bill, I think it was voted down last week, but it would have allowed for the creation of so-called village districts,
Mhm.
which are devoted, in this case, would be devoted to watershed management, and it could be a multi-town district. And it would allow the district to work with landowners, not just bordering on a particular lake,
Mhm.
but, if they identified a landowner that was halfway up a mountain, but still in the watershed, the district would be able to essentially have some input with that landowner in terms of what he or she is doing that is
Right. It's
not best practices and is hurting.
Not just people
water
on the
quality.
lake, it's
Right.
the people up the
Yeah,
hill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, we may see that, in a year, 2 years.
I'm curious as to how some of the towns, the best practices are currently doing it, if that law is not on the books. So Seneca, I know, is one, there's several other lakes that. have put-
Prioritization,
I'm sorry?
prioritization.
Yeah.
Because it's amazing. There are people who live on the lakes that actually oppose management.
Sure.
So
They don't
that's a
be told what to do.
That's.
Don't tell me I have to pump my septic once a year.
It's, it's a whole property rights thing, and, people were not willing to accept the fact that, a guy halfway up a watershed has a responsibility to the community.
So just, it's 7:40-ish. We've got 2 more committees to go through. So,
All right, great. We'll move on. This is great conversation though. Thank you. Okay, so recreation. So planning for the future of Enfield's parks, recreational spaces, trails, is critical for achieving the town's goal and being a 4-season destination, which I've heard from a few different folks that we've talked to, and that these spaces really provide many benefits, including helping to preserve natural areas, places of cultural significance, improving community health, and really enhancing the overall quality of life for residents, as well as any visitors that are coming to Enfield as well. So the town has many recreational facilities, some of which are identified on this map. These numbers were pulled from the map and the mapping data. And so if they seem off, please, we welcome your information. That would help paint a more clear picture of what's going on in town as far as recreational resources go. During our conversation with the recreation director, we also learned just anecdotally about a variety of the recreational resources that exist in Enfield. And so we've talked about the various town parks. We talked about the town beach, the boat launches, Willowback Mountain Ski Area, the golf club, which I know is not necessarily open to all now, I believe, but still another recreational resource. Although correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. The Northern Rail Trail, excuse me, sorry. Was someone going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just thinking Montcalm is only semi-private, I think is how they consider
Yes.
themselves. They are open to all in a way.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't quite sure how to describe it, but that's semi-private's good.
I think that's their term now.
If you pony up the fee, they will let you play.
They went from private to semi-private. That's all I remember them when they hosted talking about. But I don't know what the description of that means, minus then, yeah, pay some money.
Great, thank you. This map also illustrates the conservation areas in town as well, such as Smith Pond, Shaker Forest, etc. Trailheads, which are identified by the green circles, as well as a few other points, like the rail trail. I'm not quite sure where. I have to check in with Zach to see where he got the bike trail data from. And yeah, because I know. So I have that on my list to just double check where that came from and get a little bit. Again, these are in process maps, so we're very much like in the messy stages of still kind of like refining everything. And that was one of the questions that popped out for me. Are there any Mascoma Beach?
On the side of the highway.
Yeah, I was curious. I didn't
Have something on.
Are there any other, I'd love to get just like a pulse check from folks about this map and what's missing and what the questions are, because I myself had a couple points that I wanted to dive deeper into with our GIS analyst. And so if I do, like you definitely probably do, you might know more than I do. So if there's any comments.
And so it's recreation map is kind of the term, but even though Veterans Park is a park, it's not really for recreation of any type. It's more of like a memorial park.
Right. Great.
Kind of like a loose. Yeah. It's a weird spot, I guess, in a way, unless maybe just retitling that to parks and recreation so that it does cover both sides of it. Maybe, I don't know.
Liz, I would also like to add the Upper Valley Land Trust trailhead on Route 4A to Shaker Mountain. And I'd also, they have another trailhead on the other side off of Smith Pond Road. I can help you get those locations, but
There's a few trailheads on 4A, and I think there's a weird little trail through like on Shaker Hill Road, right past that.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the bog.
The bog.
Kind of thing. And then I think there's something else that's out Long Haven.
And the rail trail.
Yeah, so there's some other little trails, but that are not, like, I would love to.
Goodhue Hill Road,
What?
Goodhue Hill Road.
Maybe.
And there's trailheads too behind.
Comes off of 4A, you know where Alan
Oh,
Strickland
yeah,
is?
yeah,
That's goes up, that's a trail.
yeah.
So
So
what
there's
would be really great is I'm wondering if you all meet without us at some point, and at the end of this meeting, we'll talk about upcoming meetings in general, but it would be great to have a map like printed. And again, if some of these additions or corrections were identified, because if they're known and they just take a few people to kind of come together and to actually ID them all, and it could just be on one copy, we can make this will be so much more useful as a map.
Yeah, I don't know. The trailhead behind Lakeview condos, but I don't know if that's.
Yeah, so that's all part of the Lower Shaker, or that goes up to Smith Pond as well. It's another access to Smith Pond, I think.
And you got Suki Marsh, it's just right over.
Yeah,
So we'll have to brainstorm.
I can always grab the not so useful maps that might be a ton of. Great.
Yeah, we want to make it as most, like, if there is information that is known that is not on here, we want to get it on here, because it's already known. We don't, it's just a gap in us knowing. So it'd be great to include that. Okay, great. So we also talked with the recreation director about the programming that's offered by Parks and Rec in Enfield, as well as by other partners that exist in town. And so one of the major findings that we heard from the recreation director was that there is a need for an emerging need for more adult programming, that they mostly serve youth, although there is some adult programming that exists right now. But looking into the future, that would be a need that is anticipated as continuing to be a need and would have to be addressed. Other recreation programming, whether it be sports, et cetera, is offered by partners like the Enfield Outing Club, Mascoma Youth Sports League, Whaleback Mountain, Mascoma Lake Sailing Club, the Skating Association, et cetera. And they're important players in providing that programming to residents of the town and our partners to Enfield's Parks and Rec Department.
The library partners with it's not necessarily recreational, but they do partner with the recreation department on programming.
Who's this?
The library.
Oh, great. That's another one we can add then. Perfect.
And I feel like the Upper Valley Snow Sports Foundation and Whaleback are tied.
Together?
Not
Okay.
sure that those can, those really shouldn't be the two separate, I don't believe. But I also don't know that Upper Valley Snow Sports Foundation needs to be called out if you
Okay.
have Whaleback. So.
All right, we can do that.
Does Eva partner with them for the Shaker 7, or is that,
No, they do their own. They run it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so some of our initial findings. So as I mentioned before, this is a different side of the same coin, but participation in parks and recreation programming is increasing in general, and it has been. When we were talking to Kevin, this was identified by him in monitoring those numbers. And this is resulting in space needs and staffing volunteer needs as well, and that's anticipated to need to be addressed over time. Adult programming needs are evolving, as well as indoor programming space is needed. There's also a desire to, in general, as far as kind of a more visionary directive for this chapter, is to keep Enfield residents in Enfield to recreate and to attract visitors to Enfield as a four-season destination. Another point that was brought up was that Enfield's recreation facilities did require some coordinated upgrades, improved maintenance, and investments in a cost-effective way. So really looking at creative funding schemes for this. More about that is found in the committee notes that we provided to you about the more specific facilities and some of their needed improvements. Partnerships are an important way currently in providing recreation opportunities to Enfield community members in the region. And a lot of the recreation programming that's offered is offered by some of these other partners, like we noted. And I would say that's definitely one aspect that we could reach out to the community about in terms of park and rec, as far as, should the town take on any more additional programming? Is there a desire to do that? Does that make sense to meet any of those needs? And the Northern Rail Trail was identified as a significantly important recreational asset in Enfield, which continues to offer economic and development benefits that the town should try to continue capitalizing on in the coming years to really harness the maximum benefit. Additionally, complete streets improvements should link recreation resources to neighborhoods and other areas of town. And so this is also evident in some of the other chapters of the master plan that have already been illustrated as far as those complete streets improvements. And then a new trail master position has been added in town to support maintenance and planning of Enfield's trail infrastructure, and that this opens up an opportunity as well in thinking about the future of trails planning and improvements over time. Okay, thoughts on recreation. Again, there's a lot more information in the notes. We're just trying to provide kind of high level view. So we know that we're only touching on some of the important items with you tonight.
I think he did touch on it in the notes when I was reading through them. And I only said, so I used to be the rec director briefly, and I was the regional recreation coordinator prior to that, so it was.
This is why we didn't let her quit.
So I think I think the need for the return of adult programming is there. There's always a need for more. We have senior programming and we have youth programming. We falter again without regional because not everything can happen in Enfield, and that's
Right.
okay. I understand we want people to come to Enfield, and yes, I live here, but I grew up next door. But I think, the school has office, like, space that can be utilized.
Mhm.
And that's always a hard one because the high school, middle school is in Canaan, but we use it. So yeah, I don't know if there's a way, like, you're creating kind of, the history of recreation. Just to touch on we had 2 positions that were both part-time that helped create recreational opportunities for Enfield, that went down to the 1 full-time position eventually. And I think that would be just a good piece to have, because there used to be so much more. I mean, I was looking back, I had Zumba, we had woodworking classes, we had, we had these things that it's not, there isn't space, but there just needs to be, I think, a bigger ask, but how do we bring it back? So it's kind of a ramble, I apologize.
No, that's not.
Brain and it's not coming out.
Well, I think I mentioned this, we had a meeting and, again, it's that emphasizing of, someone to organize and what that does for the community. We have all these different small, independent groups that are doing things, and it really kind of fractures stuff between the skating association and the disc golf, and, like, everybody's there because think about the sort of conversation around tennis courts. I don't play tennis. I don't want to play, blah, 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 blah. Versus like, doesn't matter if you don't play this particular one. What is that benefit of having facilities for people in the community?
Right.
The ball field, it might be interesting to also think about things that another independent group, which is the Film Association. Again, not quite, like, to me, that's recreation. That is, that's community gathering in that sense. There's not a lot, it doesn't always have to be exercise involved, but
right, yeah.
but that's community organizing and gathering. And so and we utilize the high school for that. And so that might be some of where the questions and the conversations go, is people realizing, what resources we do have, like, and if they're available through the school district and whatnot. We don't have a community center, like I grew up with, that had a basketball court and, teen center and, art rooms and all that kind of stuff. Not that we necessarily need that, but there are other things available, but it is going to be more of a regional or, in collaboration with Canaan and, because in Lebanon, they've got 4 full-time rec people.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very strong department.
Okay.
It adds a ton to the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
they're great to partner with. Like,
they're great to partner with because they have 4 full-time people.
Yeah.
Plus a part-time person.
Yeah.
1 part-time person to do the farmer's market and then 4 full-time people.
And I did give Rob some feedback too, because we do partner regionally. We do work regionally with people. So actually, maybe that's really what I was thinking. Like, I feel like I picture recreation, or at least I pictured it upon myself when I was doing it, that I was also the hub for information. So I can't offer all of those things because we just don't have the capacity, but I can tell you where, whether it's yoga in Canaan or, you know, Enfield. So, and I guess maybe that's the way.
There's the programming we provide. There are the natural resources that are here for people to utilize and access themselves. And then there's also the partnerships that we have with surrounding communities. And I think all of those, and then they cross ages and they, you know.
Yeah, and the club.
And also just what it brings to community life. I mean, the health of the community with LEAPS started with, you know, I don't know what they're stand for, but in ours is about, you know, community health.
Great. Any other comments? I'd love for any improvements to the recreation map would be welcomed and appreciated. So at any point, if you work together or if anyone works on identifying some of those locations that were discussed earlier on the map, we'd love to see them. Okay, moving on to energy and sustainability.
Yes.
Ready.
Great. So this topic, this is the topic that is the least we're very much in the middle of still. I mean, we're kind of in the middle of all of the inventory analysis, but this one is, we have more work to do on this one. And this topic is really encompasses a lot of different things. Sustainability itself is multifaceted. It includes obviously energy, whether it's energy efficiency, reducing energy consumption, increasing renewable energy generation, but also other measures related to town life and the built environment, whether that's protecting water quality, enhancing alternative transportation, environmental conservation, limiting trash and waste and increasing recycling. So this topic really touches on a lot of the other topics that we've talked about tonight. So I do want to highlight that. And so it's requiring a little bit more research from us that we're digging into. We received a lot of great information and guidance from the Energy Committee meeting that we attended a couple weeks ago, where while we know that their role is primarily in the kind of energy aspect of sustainability, there were a lot of other great topics that were discussed related to this kind of bigger picture of sustainability in town, whether ranging from walkability to et cetera, other topics like that. So I'm just going to go through a couple slides that really focus on the conversation we had with the Energy Committee and a little bit about the mapping that was done related to some infrastructure that kind of ties to this topic. I put the map in here, but it does not necessarily have to go in the energy and sustainability chapter. We just put it in here for now because it has the phase 3 power that's identified there. Okay, so we did want to highlight some of the more recent initiatives and accomplishments that have happened in Enfield related to energy and sustainability because we believe they're noteworthy and they're definitely articulating a path forward for the town as far as building on these accomplishments in the future. So as many of you know, obviously Enfield is a community power town, and anyone who's on the Energy Committee, please let me know if I get this fact wrong. But I believe Enfield saved over $236,000 of resident and consumer savings between April 2023 to the end of the calendar year through the Community Power program, which is a significant. Yes.
Right. Yes.
Good. I'm glad I was right.
You got it.
Awesome. I didn't want to botch the first fact. But good. But that's a significant amount of savings, and it was for about half of the calendar year, and so it's exciting to see where it can go over time. Additionally, a solar system was installed as part of the community power purchase agreement on the DPW salt shed. There have been LED conversions in the DPW building, the community building, and Whitney Hall. There have been a number of energy efficiency educational workshops that have been held by the Energy Committee and brought in guest speakers and others as well. And There's been a program on the collection of non-traditional recycling items like toothpaste tubes and those items that are really challenging to recycle, and water quality protection and stormwater management measures that have been completed by the town as a whole were also referenced. And so I did want to show this map that identifies some of the electric and telecommunications infrastructure in town. So this was identified, and again, we can talk about how best to show some of these maps within the chapters. But right now, this map includes the location of cell towers in town. So those are the blue circles with the cross in the middle. It shows the fiber optic cable, which is the bright green lines. And it shows the 3-phase power, which is the bright pink. And then the 3 electric service area sheds are identified by these kind of opaque boundary lines. And so it shows the electric utility territories within town. So I'm just curious if there are initial reactions to this map.
The reference to Granite State Electric, that's maybe the parent company, but it's not the company that we associate with. That would be Liberty Utilities.
Okay, thank you.
And the same with Public Service of New Hampshire. That's commonly known as Eversource.
Great, thank you. Other observations or comments?
There is a new cell tower coming that's not ready yet, but it's, I can get you that location. It's gonna be in the northeast part of town. I'm sorry, northwest.
So I think once the story around this map is fleshed out, I think it will be interesting, especially in relation to some of what we talked about in the town facilities and services section related to fiber, of just showing, you know, the extent of the community that does have fiber optic cable and that which does not, and same thing with 3-phase power. So I think it does tell an interesting story, and it will be integrated.
Sorry, Liz. Will we be able to get, if we're working on finishing the fiber optic, can we do a future line? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
Rob.
thought it would make it too cluttered or, but like showing who has it and then who's going to get it, because that would just, that future
I can
piece.
talk to Hub 66 is the company that'll be doing that.
Yeah, I
We can
mean,
see
it
if
might
they've
be
got like a
interesting
build out.
if it doesn't make it too cluttered, that would give that like, you know, as we're looking forward, and this is the reason to partner with these people. This is the reason we're doing this stuff, is that we are getting fiber optic cable to, this is coming down the line.
Yes, if that information is known or will be known at some point in the next few months, as far as what the extent and distribution of that expansion, that'd be great. And we could even show that with like the same color green, but have it be a dashed line to kind of indicate like, you know, it's not constructed yet, or something like that to help it blend a little. I know there's a lot of lines on this map.
Yeah, that's why I was like, if it doesn't make it too cluttered, that might be really interesting again for folks to, you know, if they don't see themselves on it, they might see themselves on it in the future, or know it's coming. If we can get that data.
Yeah. How does the 3-phase power stuff look as far as, just for anyone that is familiar with that, mapping data? Accurate, basically, is, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
It looks pretty good.
As far as we know.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any other thoughts on this map before we move on? Is this a helpful map?
I think so. I think it's good. I think we need to see what, again, we need to emphasize that the energy and the future, you know, and there are a lot of people that go, well, we don't have internet, we don't have this, and don't want us to do, you know, electronic communications, and like the internet's not new. Right. but there is that, and I get some people don't own computers. That's very different than access. And we need to show that we're providing or going to be providing access and into the future, and that, or the future is here now. And that we are a modern community. And I think that while we want to preserve heritage and all of that, we are a modern community. And I think that needs to be highlighted. And that's what I really like about this, as well as energy savings. I mean, the savings numbers is phenomenal for half a year. We really want to highlight those wins, because everyone talks about all the money that we're spending, but coming together as a collective, you know, and the work that's been done by very few number of people. So I think this is really important.
The thing about the three-phase power is that it really limits our ability for development.
Yep.
And that needs to be highlighted.
So.
Thank you. Okay. So it really shouldn't say future solar, it should say future just energy generation, distribution, transmission, all part of the bigger picture as far as three-phase power and future development goes, that is a major issue, opportunity, and priority that was brought up by the Energy Committee. And I'm just curious, and I'm so sorry, I spaced on your name, the Energy Committee member that's also on this task force. I can't remember your name.
Joe Ellen.
Joe, thank you so much. Do you have anything else you want to say about three-phase power that you want to make sure is included in this conversation?
I just feel like I'm always complaining about it, so no.
Okay, that's fine. We included some stuff in the committee notes as well, but it's at the top of the list for a reason, as far as it appeared to be a major priority for the Energy Committee. And so we wanted to make sure it was highlighted in this conversation. Additionally, other items that were brought up by the committee as far as kind of future visioning of how sustainability and energy could look in Enfield over time, would be identifying opportunities to improve the sustainability of Enfield's town facilities. So again, this really highlights how sustainability and energy is integral to a lot of the other chapters, and will probably be touched on in some way in even the town facilities and services chapter, at least referenced, to ensure that it's really integrated throughout the plan as a whole. Additionally, flooding and high precipitation events were also brought up as being an important facet to look at in relation to community resilience. And so creating a plan to make infrastructure more resilient over time, for example, upsizing culverts is important for the town to consider. And we'll want to make sure that we do a little bit of analysis work on our end to just understand some of what some of the biggest flooding impacts are and where they are in town, so that we can really highlight that. Additionally, the need for more electric vehicle infrastructure was also identified as an emerging and future need that would need to be addressed over time. And so I believe there's one electric vehicle charging station that I confirmed with Rob earlier today in town as of now, at the golf club. But there's opportunity for increasing EV infrastructure in the future. And what are some of the ways that Enfield might be able to do that and plan for that? Expanding renewable energy infrastructure in solar generation was identified specifically, but just renewable energy generation as a whole. Expanding walkability and promoting alternative forms of transportation, really aligning policies with energy and sustainability goals. So making energy and sustainability a focal point in long-range planning efforts that are, again, integrated around conversations about the future of housing, the future of economic development, the future of adaptive reuse of historic structures. So really integrating that into the framework of this plan. And investing in protecting the quality of Enfield's water resources. Again, that was also brought up through a sustainability perspective and lens as well. Again, these are just some of the items that were talked about during our meeting with the Energy Committee, and we're looking forward to hearing whether you all have some thoughts on and questions and how to engage the public on some of this information, because hearing some of your really insightful comments throughout the meeting, I have a feeling you all might have some good ideas. Okay. Thoughts on energy and sustainability, knowing that we have the most work to do on that section, but thoughts on some of the initial items that we brought up.
Looks good.
Okay.
I just have one comment on the energy committee.
Yes.
We didn't talk about, or I don't know if we talked about that or not, but there's some low hanging fruit as far as building codes, getting additional insulation and saving energy through that with more insulation and those kind of things.
Thank you.
Has anybody done anything about climate change? I know some towns are running around planting trees and they're on their roads, on the little islands on the either on the side, on the sidewalks or little islands on the roads to take some of the heat off. Do you find that in your work? Anybody
In
doing
terms of
that?
climate action, yes, we have, but in terms of like the tree planting and some of the like using vegetation as a way to combat climate change specifically. Let me know if I'm misunderstanding your question.
Just if do we have any resource to do that, or should we be looking at that?
And that might be a good future plan if you know, I know we've got, I think through some of the energy committee, there's conversations of climate change, right? Or is it conservation? I know there's conversations around climate change, and that does intersect with other groups. So sometimes the tree planting on roads, it does that, but it also is a traffic calming technique, because people tend to go slower on tree lined roads than they do on non-tree lined roads. Like it's a psychological traffic calming.
Yeah.
Or like if there's
That's
spaces in
good.
Hanover where they don't mow and they'll say, we're letting this grow for the pollinators. But right now,
Yeah.
it helps, but yeah, complete streets are about having trees. Cause it helps to slow people down.
Right, well.
Yeah, and I think
It makes a
highlight,
big difference.
Sure.
I think you highlight a great point. Totally. Yeah, and I think you make a good point too, where one role of the master plan is to serve as an educational document as well. And so this is where we can kind of tie in this like bigger issue of climate change with a lot of these other actions that have already been, you know, undertaken by some of these committees and that will be undertaken in the future, and you know, just shine a light on some of the bigger issues that they're working towards.
I just see this as an opportunity to take a more progressive stance on doing something about climate change.
Right.
I think the other educational piece is the questions that I always see arising. And I never know if there's a right space, and I don't know if this is the right space to do it, but like, you know, electric vehicle charging stations, everybody, well, who's gonna pay for it?
Right.
You know, like, and so that like, or, and I think Phil, you experienced this, like to put up a solar array, what's the environmental impact of putting up a solar farm? You know, like, so there's always this interface, you know, that intersection of new energy technologies, but like with the research of how it's gonna impact things environmentally. Also, you know, so we always have to be, I think that we need to at least acknowledge that or point towards research or acknowledge that there's tension there. And or, you know, and how those get solved.
The other thing was about zoning issues that we currently have in place for putting solar arrays.
And I think that'll probably be addressed in some of the new zoning regs.
Trees also provide the shade and cooling wherever they are.
Right.
If they're kept around the lake shore, they keep the lake cooler,
Sure.
Mhm.
which helps with the cyanobacteria.
Yeah.
They also protect you from, there's good screen for the dust along the dirt road, anywhere.
Yep.
But,
I mean, there's all sorts of things. Again, it's always like, there's always gonna be tension between.
Right.
And the research doesn't always, isn't like, a lot of times technologies outpace the research because we have to see how they, what happens. It's kind of like there's
Right.
always a lot of, there's always a little bit of an uproar for a cell tower. But then now that everybody has a cell phone, then they're like, it doesn't work, I mean, like, and we want another cell tower, but that does have that has an impact, power line has an impact. So those are the kinds of things that we just have to, and I don't know, asking questions and or providing some resources, especially around newer technologies, I would say. But that also, like, some of these are inevitable. They're coming down,
Right.
Electric cars are a big conversation.
Yeah.
And the jury's out on them in a way,
Right.
but. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. It was like one of the topics of conversation as well with the Energy Committee was how, in terms of kind of creative funding for some of these different possibilities and infrastructure and initiatives, et cetera, is that there are opportunities for funding. They exist, but that there's limited capacity. There's no grant writer. There's, so there are some of these other like, hidden challenges that kind of are related, I feel like, with what you were mentioning. I think that was Lindsay. I can't see on my screen. To just like, who's going to pay for it? Like, is it through taxpayer money? Is it actually just incentivizing EV infrastructure through regulations? Is it a combination of these different things? Like, there are these questions that come up, and there are these kind of hidden barriers to how they are accomplished or not. But anyway, yeah. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle. Okay, are we ready to transition to the community forum events?
yeah.
We have 10 minutes, so I'm gonna breeze through this while still honoring the information and giving you what you need, but I'll be efficient with your time. So we worked with the chairs and Rob and also Steve Whitman of our firm, who is really the representative for resilience planning for the HOP project. And so these community forum events are going to be held in conjunction with the HOP Housing Opportunities grant work to get public feedback on some of what they're doing, as well as getting public feedback for the Phase 2 Master Plan update. So we're combining these together into two exciting events. And we set dates for both two of the same event, exactly the same, identical, but they're held 2 different days and times of the week. So it's looking like Thursday, May 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the community building, and Saturday, May 11th from 10 to 12 at the community building. And so really so put them in your calendars. If you attend 1 out of 2, that's great. We love to have a handful of committee members at these events. It doesn't have to be everyone, but it'd be great to have at least a handful. So feel free to look at your calendars and let us know. But the format of the event is really drop-in style, which we found. We've hosted events like this in many, many communities, and we've gotten really, really good feedback. But it really allows community members to still receive a 15-minute presentation at the beginning. Typically, it's us describing a little bit about the project, what the task force, what you all have been up to, what our role is in the Phase 2 Master Plan update, and really what the role of the public is in helping articulate community priorities and desires, and giving us more information, giving you all more information to sift through so that you can make better informed decisions for the content of these chapters. And so aside from that 15-minute presentation, that's when we really let community members loose, and they travel to stations that are set up around the room, typically by topic. And there's maps, there's posters with infographics and other information, some of which we've talked about tonight, but a lot of, stats and facts and figures that we'll create in format on these very graphic posters so that they communicate, give something for community members to react to as they explore discussion questions, which are usually on worksheets. And we tend to have a couple interactive exercises throughout the room as well that involve, drawing on a map or putting sticky dots on a map or something like that are a little bit more engaging. But really, people can decide whether they want to go to all the stations, one of the stations, go in whatever order they want. And it makes for a really fun and lively event because usually people are milling about. There's oftentimes tables and chairs that are located in the center of the room, so neighbors can sit with each other after they've, walked around the full breadth of the room and sit down and fill out some of the worksheets together. So it's really choose your own adventure. And again, we've really found that these types of events provide great feedback, and people do provide, someone said this earlier, when they provide feedback in writing, we get a lot of really, really valuable information in their own words. Questions on the dates and format of the event so far?
So I just want to add context, Liz, for everyone. The reason we chose these dates is we can't go too far down the road. We wanted to do a weekday and a weekend. I will be at the Thursday one. Dave will be at the Saturday one. And then if you can make it there. The other nice thing, the Saturday one coincides with the first farmer's market. So we can hopefully have somebody outside that can be kind of grabbing people in,
You volunteer.
so we can, and I know that there's a Lioness meeting on that Thursday. So I'm hoping to like grab them after their meeting and bring them upstairs. But these were and because of the nature of the meeting or that it's more milling, the community building will work really well for that. And it's still that central location. So that's how we came to those dates and and why.
So for people that can't make these two dates, are there alternative ways that they can have the same input?
Yes.
Okay.
So for anyone who can't attend either of these events, we will create basically an online version of the materials and the discussion questions that are available at these two events. We'll basically put them into a SurveyMonkey platform and we'll link to the maps and posters, and it'll be up. Typically we have it up for a month after the in-person opportunities.
Super.
So then it'll be really incumbent upon us to be spreading the word and making sure that it gets into every, that we keep repeating it, that we encourage people to come, or, pointing them to all the different ways that they can participate.
At the last meeting, we talked a little bit about some groups that we didn't get nearly as much feedback as we'd like to. I think one of the groups was folks that are renting in apartments. And I wonder if we could brainstorm a little bit more on that. We don't have to do it now, it's getting late, but could we brainstorm a little bit more on how can we improve that?
So write that down, because we can parlay that into our next two meetings.
Yeah. And so what we can do too is that we can draft a flyer, like what it can be utilized as a print flyer, but it can also be utilized. We'll create like a PDF and a JPEG that is promoting these two events, and that can be shared on social media. It can be printed and hung up in public locations. It can be sent in an email if you send an email out to different groups in the community. So it can have multiple different ways of using it, but we can try to have that for you at one of your next upcoming meetings so that you can take a look at it. And hopefully if you talk a little bit more about advertising at those meetings, that will serve as a tool for implementing some of those ideas.
Great.
Okay, other thoughts on this? Again, I know it's 8:24 right now, so I'm cognizant of time and I'm making notes right now. I'd love to send, it sounds like you all are already tracking some of this, but I'd love to send just some of our notes, a bulleted list of items for you all to talk a little bit about on your own when you're not meeting with us. And that will help us all move forward a little bit more on these community forum events. So I've made a little list here. I'll send my email once the meeting's over to Rob. Okay, other thoughts on this so far?
I want to go back to something and so when you're ready,
Go ahead, Susie, go ahead.
I want to go back to the conservation. And
Yeah.
one thing that is not on any of the maps is probably in your, I don't know, in your inventory. Actually, it's the Conservation Commission has a lot that they purchased. This is one of the things that they did. On Mud Pond, which is also prime wetland. And when we bought this, the intent was to, and it still is, but we need people that would get involved. It was to build like a boardwalk that would go out a little ways to get to there, you have to go through this wetland. It's really a lot of vegetation, and if you walk in it, you sink down to nowhere. So to build a boardwalk and build it into an educational opportunity to teach kids and so on and so forth. And we never got to it, but it's still there and it still can be done. And that should be in that part of the thing the Conservation Commission does. Cause that was we worked on getting that.
Great, I've noted that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other thoughts? The next slide talks about next steps, and I think that might answer any lingering questions about the forum events as well, as far as what's kind of the immediate next steps. So I can go to that slide now.
Oh, yeah. We went in there, went down like 4 feet in the mud, I couldn't get it. Lost the air.
Okay. So on our end, over the next month, we're going to continue finishing, knowing that this is somewhat of a cyclical process, but theoretically, we're refining, finishing the inventory and analysis of existing conditions by topic over the remainder of this month. And really, that's where we're going to be getting a lot of our information for the posters from. We also want to work with you all to brainstorm those discussion questions and begin, on our end, we'll begin formatting forum materials over the next month or so. Because I have a conflict on April 8th and April 22nd, which I know is inconvenient. And so I want to propose, and I have some alternatives if this really just does not work. I would like to propose and I know that I think the room is booked, and so it would have to be a virtual meeting, but would people be open to me meeting with you all as a task force on April 15th, even if you met without me on April 8th? But have that be the date instead of the 22nd, because I know that those are your two regularly scheduled meeting dates for the task force.
No, that's why she said she'll do it virtually.
And we may have to, if we do it virtually, we'll tape it. Otherwise, I'll keep that right. Assuming that's a select board meeting.
Thoughts?
15th is fine with me. I don't know.
Same time.
Yeah, it'll be virtual, Celie, because the select board is here.
Also
Yeah.
Zooming.
So we'll have to zoom in. Yeah, Teams.
Okay.
So, I don't think there's a really good other. I mean, public
Just-
space.
But it raises a question, if it's a public meeting. Whatever, I don't need to go there.
We've got plenty of time that it'll, as long as it's
It'll
on the
be
calendar.
posted.
As
Yeah,
long as we
because-
post it
Okay,
and post the link.
Yeah,
good enough.
so 15th, yes, okay, yep, let's do that, Liz.
Thank you for your flexibility. I really appreciate it. And I promise I won't be making you switch it up for all the other months. And so that gives you all some time as well in terms of if you do have your regularly scheduled March meeting and your regularly scheduled April meeting, which would be the week before the 15th, and that's up to you to decide how you want to do that. Having at least one meeting beforehand allows you to still dig into some of the community forum kind of planning and thinking about those details, as well as digging into some of the committee outreach and et cetera. It gives you time to do that. But for the focus of the next meeting, we wanted to set aside some time to talk about discussion questions with you. And I know that you all might have some good ideas for discussion questions. I mean, there was already some that were brought up tonight. And so I really encourage if you generate any potential questions that you want to make sure that we integrate into the worksheets to, if possible, send them over to me prior to April 15th. So even if you meet on April 8th and you have some notes, just some notes, even if they're rough, potential questions, if we get them, we can combine them with some of our expertise of what we tend to ask and what we think could be, good questions to ask based on our research, and kind of put that together into a deliverable for you all on the 15th. So that would be like a hybrid fusion between, your ideas, and then we can take a look at it and format them into the worksheets and have some of our ideas added as well.
Liz,
Does that
Liz,
sound
excuse
good?
me. Do you find that yes, no questions work best, or open-ended questions?
So we've done great question. So we typically have a combination of both. And the key for an event like this, what we've noticed is that it's helpful to have just like a front and back side of a worksheet. So typically like 4 questions is ideal. We notice people can because you can spend a lot of time answering one question if it's an open-ended question. And so there's a lot of stations in the room, and we want to make sure that it's realistic for people to kind of get through the stations if they do choose to go to all of them in a timely way. But typically what we see is 4 minimum, 6 maximum, and oftentimes we'll bundle questions. So like there might be question 1 might ask a yes or no, and then it might have a follow-up question that says, if yes, please describe blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? But does that give some insight?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yes. So how does that sound? Does that plan sound good as far as aligned with kind of what you're all thinking?
Yeah, and so then for the task force members, so then what we thought, we're not gonna meet twice a month every time, but this is we want to be prepared for this community forum, which will happen in early May. And so we have either the 4th Monday in March, which is the 25th, or, and we could do that, and then if we feel like we need to do the 8th, we could do the 8th, because that would be our normal second Monday. Or we could just hit the second Monday, and this would be just for us, Liz and Crystal, thanks, would not be there, but this is where we can process the stuff we've heard, start to brainstorm a whole bunch of different things. It's better to have more questions and not need them than worry about just then coming down with 4, because those questions
Agreed.
might make their way to the survey tool or whatever. But this would be an opportunity for us. So we've got either the 25th, right? Which would be the 4th, so 2 weeks from now. And the 8th, those are both open.
And what's your
And-
pleasure? You guys
and
do
yes,
Both or just one or?
And that we meet in person in this room. For those, for one or the other.
Right?
I would,
Start with that one?
I would suggest earlier, so the
Uh-huh.
25th of
Okay.
March.
And then
which
if you
gives us
need the
more time.
8th, like you said, that would
Then
be.
it's there, and if we don't, then we have a 2-week break, and we can send everything to Liz, and then that way that'll be a really productive meeting, focusing on that. And then if we need any other prep before May, we have, there's technically another week in April, so the 22nd. You know what I mean? So let's aim for the 25th,
Yes.
What time? 6:30 here?
6:30 here.
That
Okay.
sounds great. And the last, we did want to just put on your radar is that for the April 15th, we're also going to be submitting to you all for your review, basically a bulleted list of the kind of stats and information that we want to show on the posters. So we need a little bit more time in April to actually format all those posters, but you'll at least be able to reflect on the information that we're going to be including in them and just like react and say, okay, that's great. That's good information for the public to know, or, oh, I think this should be tweaked, or et cetera.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe
Great.
March meeting, we can get some of these maps and.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
Phew, thank you all. I know this was a long meeting. I really appreciate your patience and all of your great feedback during the discussion.
Oh, you guys have done a tremendous amount of work, and I can't, as someone that was on the first iteration of this, I can't even tell you how refreshing it is to have somebody else doing the heavy lifting and really bringing us along versus us trying to figure it out. And I know how to do this work, but I don't do it professionally, and it's been 20 years since grad school, so. Take myself
Good.
for it.
Well, you have been a
But
pleasure
anyway.
to work with.
Yeah, so it's, I felt that way after we got up of our meeting a week and a half ago or whatever it was. I was like, just so nice that other people like.
You don't have to
Totally.
build the airplane. at
We don't have to
12,000
build the
feet.
airplane. Yeah,
Yes.
so thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank
Thank you,
you all.
Crystal.
Thank
Thank
All right.
you.
Have a great
Have
night.
a good night.
Okay, bye, Phil. Have fun out in Arizona.
Bring some sunshine home. Send it here.
I plan to bring it back with me.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay,